This is the Nikon 1 series. It's Nikon's new super small sensor interchangeable camera. It has I think it's a 2.7 35mm crop sensor. This is the J1 model, which is the cheapest of the two. There's the V1 and the J1, and both have close to the same features, but the one feature that I was interested in was both equal, so I went for the cheaper camera for this review. Now, with the other cameras that I talk about and stuff, why would I bring this knife to the gunfight? Well, here's the reason. And by the way, this isn't a really great price with the lens. You can get a GH2 for basically the same price. It's like 600 bucks. Anyway, besides the point, what this can do is it can shoot 400 frames per second and 1200 frames per second. Now 1200 frames per second, the image is so small that it's basically unusable unless, I don't know, maybe there's some kind of magic that I don't know about that will make that usable. But the 400 frames per second mode is the best, definitely under $1,000, and best that I can find anywhere near that price. It shoots at 640 by 240 at 400 frames per second. Now, that isn't very high, but in this realm of YouTube and everything where everyone watches this at 360p, and if you're watching that, you can click down there at the bottom and click in original mode, because I'm shooting anamorphic. Which is another interesting point. The aspect ratio when it crops down the sensor to the slow motion mode is essentially an anamorphic sized aspect ratio. So what I've been working on is a way to make that usable. Now there is a way to make that usable. Now all the clips that you watch of these Nikon 1 series at 400 frames per second they all look super digitally enhanced. And that is because, and you're not going to be able to see the menu because I can't focus close enough here, but in the menu there are options. And you know, for being a Nikon camera and being a small Nikon camera, this does have a good set of manual controls for most functions. It's really annoying to use the focus and everything, but you can set things manually, which is better than, say, a D90. When you get into picture control, there's an option for picture control. In there, I've chosen the neutral picture tone, and if you turn sharpening all the way down to 0, I can show you before and after of what sharpening at default and sharpening at 0 looks like. You'd never use the sharpening up, because when it goes into that crop sensor mode or that crop down super high frame rate mode, that sharpening looks really, really terrible. And in there's a good amount of controls, the same about as you'd get on a typical Canon camera for settings: contrast, brightness, saturation, hue, and you can set those for your options. I wish I could focus closer, but being, again, this is an anamorphic lens, you can click this into original quality and you could probably read that. But that's what I did to make this usable, and you can tell the difference. When I first started, it looked terrible, and then using it like that, it actually becomes slightly usable. The other thing is that I added information with a little bit of noise, a little bit of magic bullet grain, and then with Twixtor, I was able to get up to 3200 frames per second, which is a lot more than I can get out of, say, a 60 frame per second camera, or sometimes I can get 1000 frames per second. I wish there was a higher end way to, well, not a higher end way, but yes, a higher end way to get high frames per second, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. If you want, at least in probably the next 6 months, to be able to shoot at 400 frames per second, this is probably your best bet. Now, for me, there's there's a problem with my camera that I just got in testing it. I think there's a problem with the white balance. It's been balancing in strange colors. That is the one thing that bothers me about this, because I can't set my white balance via Kelvin menu like I do on my other cameras, all my other cameras. So, I mean, in terms of a compact camera, this is probably has the most amount of controls. I haven't tested a GF3. It probably has all those manual controls, but for a Nikon, it's very impressive. For people that, well, I'd still go with the Panasonic just because you can get adapters for your other Nikon lenses, but they're going to be stratospheric, and you won't have any wide angle lens if you're going to adapt your old Nikon lenses. In any case, this is a good option for web slow motion videos. The Casio had the last high-speed motion camera that would shoot at a lower resolution than this back in 2008, and it's been discontinued, and buying it now is more expensive. This is a very good option to counter that. I don't know of any other cameras that will do the same thing this will do at that speed. So it's impressive for doing that. In terms of other video performance, the codec kind of falls apart when used, so I wouldn't really recommend it over, say, a hacked GH1 or GH2. When you pan, you're going to get macro blocking because there just isn't enough data in the codec. But for slow motion, this is the only one that does what it does, so take that as you will. And so it's a cool little camera. There's a little flash. But I'd only use it in video purposes for super slow motion for web content.